I'm Don Mooers, and welcome to Montgomery Week in Review. The tax bill that's currently making its way through Congress, going before a joint committee, will impact Montgomery County and our citizens in many, many different ways. Bonnie Casper, former policy analyst and now a realtor, is here to discuss some of the ways that this bill is going to impact us.
Thank you, Don.
In the last weeks, young people have taken their lives. Several young people have taken their lives in our schools. Jane DeWinter, who comments for this program on a regular basis, especially about education programs, has the details about how the school system is trying desperately to respond to these tragic events. The December issue of The Beacon has a story about couriers, senior couriers who carry bone marrow transplant material around the country to help keep the bone marrow transplant system working. Stuart Rosenthal, editor and publisher of The Beacon, will review this story as well as other topics, especially in the financial area, that are of interest to all of us. Montgomery County Public Libraries teaming up with Friends of Libraries about the Big Read. Big Read is about ready to come up. Big Read 2018. We've got Tom Thomson, chair of the Friends of the Library, to discuss the Big Read and also all the different ways with little reads that we can make ourselves much more informed and more interesting people. Bonnie, it's been so long.
It has.
It's great to see you.
Good to see you, and thank you for having me.
It's great to see it. What I want to do is we're talking about the tax bill, and I've taken a look at it, and every time I start reading it, I see all these things that have nothing to do with taxes. These things that are appalling to me that they got in from my political perspective, personal. So I don't want to stay with. We want to talk about this. We talked earlier, three different ways this bill is going to impact us here in Montgomery County.
Well, the bill is really, either bill, whether it's the Senate version or the House version, will adversely impact particularly the state of Maryland and those of us in Montgomery County, because there are three main items. The mortgage interest deduction.
How does the mortgage interest deduction work now?
Currently, you can take up to your interest on $1 million of a mortgage and deduct that from your federal taxes. Okay. The new bill in the House side will be at $500,000. In the Senate side, it's $1 million. Who knows which way they'll go.
Okay.
The second one is state and local taxes. Right now, you can deduct your property tax, your income tax, et cetera, that you pay at the state and local level, and deduct that from your federal tax.
With the idea being that we don't pay taxes twice.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. The bill, whether it's the House bill or the Senate bill, you will only be able to deduct up to $10,000 of what you're paying and all of that interest. So that is also very much a negative in a high tax state such as the state of Maryland, just as it would be in New York, just as it would be in California, basically the coastal states.
So what we're saying is that those things that we pay for, that's our schools, our roads, our infrastructure, all these great services that provided we have to pay for, and so now we're going to pay for them twice, three times, four times, whatever. Okay.
Exactly. And the third main item is the capital gains provision. Right now, if you own a home, your primary residence, you can deduct up to, you can live in the home for 2 of 5 years before you go to sell the house. Under the new provisions, whether it's the Senate or the House version, it's going to be 5 of 8 years.
And when you're talking about capital gains, so then you're not, if you bought the house for $200 and you sell it for $200,000, you sell it for $500,000.
The capital gains provision gives you $250,000 as an individual, $500,000 as a couple. So what it's now saying is, you buy a home, you get transferred. You've been in the home 5 years. Right now, you would think, well, okay, the capital gains provisions will trigger. And if I'm not, going to make a profit of more than $500,000, and it's a couple, for example, then you're going to stand to be in good situation.
So can't you roll it over into a new home still? Is that going away too?
It will be there, I believe, but you'll have to be in the current home for 8 years.
Even to do the rollover?
Yes. Yeah. For any part of it, it's going to go from 5 years to 8 years, being in the home from 2 years to 5 years.
And there's a number of situations where people don't where they're not rolling over into something that's equivalent. I mean, if you moved from, say, here out to, you know, the middle of
someplace
Iowa or something
right,
where
less
housing
costly
costs are much less, you might not roll the whole amount over.
Right.
And when you're,
those are capital gains.
when you're downsizing.
Right.
So,
Right. But the other point on the mortgage interest deduction is actually the one point I didn't make is that right now it's on your primary home and a second home.
Okay.
With the new provisions, it's only going to be on your primary home. So you go from $1 million to $500,000, and it's not on your second home as well. It's on only your primary.
Bonnie, using your crystal ball, can you give us some idea as to what you think the impact of that provision in the tax law, should it be passed, have on potential buyers?
Well, let me just take those three provisions together, because the National Association of Realtors actually conducted a study. PricewaterhouseCoopers just completed a study this summer. And that study shows that if these bills were to be implemented, housing values would go down over 10%.
Wow.
You would have a situation that makes 2007, 2008 not look so bad.
We've got about 45 seconds left. So so people who are mortgaged to the hilt, suddenly they're going to be upside down.
Correct.
A number of them because.
Correct. You're going to lose many buyers because folks are not going to understand what is the point of owning a home. You'll lose so a seller, if you don't have a buyer, what's the value of your home?
And not to mention more taxes for schools and that they're paying
Correct.
back.
But our legislators
10
are going to
seconds.
be voting against it anyway, right? We don't have to call our...
Yes, all the legislators in Maryland except for the one who represents the Eastern Shore, and he has in fact supported it.
Okay. Well, Bonnie, thank you.
You're welcome.
That was such a great summation and coming through, made it much clearer for everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Wow.
Yeah.
So we go from what's going to be adversely affecting in the future in Montgomery County to this tragedy among our kids in schools. What's going on? Jen?
Well, the reason why, you know, it's a topic du jour is because for 2017, it's been 5 teens in Montgomery County, but in the last
5 teens who have
committed suicide.
Have committed suicide and these are all in high school. These are all high school kids.
Right. Well, one of them is a middle school,
Oh, boy.
but there's been 3 within the last several weeks.
And we're taping this in the first week of December, so
Correct.
just
Correct.
the Thanksgiving time and all this.
Yes,
wow.
and one of them was a 12-year-old, and 2 of them were 16-year-olds, one at Whitman High School and one at Walter Johnson High School.
Wow.
So it's a little bit ironic because the school system had actually just this fall already launched an initiative to, you know, really to be working with kids and working with school staff and parents and whatever, called Be the One, to really get people, or kids especially, to recognize when they should speak up if they have concerns about, you know, friends or...
Be the one who stands up, be the one who's recognizing the signs, be the one who...
Are they finding that their classmates were aware that things were going south and they didn't say anything?
I don't know for this, I don't really know the details for these particular students. I think it's just, you know, there is concern that, and there's, you know, it's kind of perennial concern that teen suicides, you know, are somewhat contagious. That, and so I think that whenever there's, especially 2, you know, fairly public things in, you know, in Bethesda, Whitman and Walter Johnson, you know, they want to have a strong response to, you know, to make sure that, you know,
We'd hope that'd be any place.
Is there training, or are there programs for the parents as well that they can work with their children to help them understand what are the signs that they should see in their friends?
And that this is part of the Be the One campaign, but I know because I have a child at Walter Johnson that in the wake of this, I mean, we've had several communications from the school system, but partly to describe what the school system is doing. I mean, the suicide at Walter Johnson happened over the weekend, and so Monday morning, before school even began, they had all the staff in discuss,
Sure.
how to handle it with their students, what resources were available, and information about the signs of,
And I'm sure while many of the teachers were grieving as well. And
Oh,
trying to find
exactly,
answers.
exactly.
That's
And so the school system, they give the teachers the tools to discuss it in their classes. They bring in staff from
Right.
the central office to be a resource for teachers and students. And they do a lot to publicize the signs.
I mean,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things that we discussed before the program started was the degree to which the efforts being made to reach the students themselves, to be able to have them help their friends who may be experiencing signs of depression and so
Right.
forth. That could lead to them perhaps hurting themselves.
Right, and that one of the things, especially with teens, because teens are very, they're loyal to their friends and whatever, and so the natural inclination is if somebody expresses something that might be worrying to you, but you're going to keep that confidence. And so part of this campaign with Be the One is to be educating teens on when is it appropriate to share something that's a concern.
But it's also looking at the signs. I mean, what
looking at the
what are
signs.
these what are these
Right.
signs?
But as you
and-
point out, there's this sort of copycat mentality. Once they start happening, more happen. And then there was this TV show that showed a young woman
Right.
being bullied and then taking her own life and how she did it. And that also seems to have
Right, it's a big focus.
increased the
People are
talking
concerned about
it,
that, yeah. Well, one of the elements of this Be the One campaign is that, I think we're all familiar with,
about
there's
minute
crisis hotlines. Well, so teens don't really, they do use their phones a lot, but not to call, so that there is now a text line. So they're trying to publicize this. This is in Montgomery County. Teens or anybody can text 741-741. And that's going to have, somebody, to text back to discuss, what's your concern, what's going on. It's like a crisis text line.
With our kids, I think, we're all parents, and having, going through this, getting through this period, and trying to bring in some hope or ambition, goals, and there's a lot of bad things going on around the world. It's not just the pressure within our schools, but you look around and we're more divided, and I think it's easier right now for kids to lose hope.
Right.
In the future, and I don't know how we as adults are able to do the best. I mean, stay in there.
Right.
It's all going to get better. The world's going to get better. Whatever. If you're on the left, the right's not going to be there. If you're on the right, the left's not. I mean, whatever the case may
Well,
be.
and I think that we all know, teens. We typically say, teens do stupid things. Teens do risky things because
Right.
they don't think about the future. But it's the same thing.
Right.
Kids may find it more difficult to see hope in the future.
Well, we got to. That's the last word, unfortunately. I'm sorry. We'll be right back after these messages. And we're back. Stuart, it's great to see you.
Thank you.
The Beacon, our favorite newspaper in the world.
Thank you.
Except when
Mine
others
too.
are on. Well, no, I have to tell you. No, I love your show. So I want to get to these financial stories because they're so interesting. Because people are still wondering, and the credit's at risk. They're not doing
Right,
that.
right. The Equifax hack.
Right. Before we get to that,
Okay.
this cover story about the bone marrow courier
Right,
squad.
right.
I like it.
Yes, it's very exciting. So when they have a need for bone marrow, you have an international database with tens of millions of names, and the idea is they try to find somebody who has exactly the right blood type and whatnot to make it possible to replenish the blood supply of someone who's had chemotherapy or something. So you may have someone who's your perfect match a continent away.
Right.
And once they take the bone marrow out of a person who's the donor, they have to be putting it into the recipient within 48 hours, or it's no good anymore. So you need to have.
You can't rely on FedEx or
No,
UPS.
no, you can't rely on that at all. You have to have trained couriers who are callable at a moment's notice, who will go through fire and ice in order to get that there on time. And a lot of them happen to be older adults because they have the time to be on call and move at a moment's notice to do that. So we wrote about a couple of them locally and what they're doing.
Unsung heroes.
Yeah.
Unsung
They
heroes.
really feel great about what they do. I mean, they don't need to be sung about. They just
No,
every
but
time they do
right.
it, they realize they've saved a life.
What's and I think towards the end of the year, and we're looking at holidays and all that stuff. Stories like this are so important to help us remember during these times of division that we have that goodness is still there.
Right. People out of their way to help others.
And goodness really leads to Equifax, doesn't it?
That's a great segue.
Great segue, yes. So you got some stories.
Right, right. So that hack of Equifax took the details, name, address, phone number, social security number, of 145 million Americans. So a lot of us have really been, I have too, been hacked in that way. So the question is, what do you need to do? Well, we've been hearing for months now about freezing your credit report. Because whenever a creditor is opening up, you're opening up a bank account or whatever, you need to, they check your credit, maybe you get a loan of some sort. And if there's a freeze on it, they have to ask twice or make sure that it's really you and that kind of thing. So that can help. But we have an article in this month's paper talking about, well, your bank account and your social security account are also equally at risk. IRS, lots of things as well. And the credit report isn't necessarily going to be what saves you there. So I didn't know this, but there are 4 agencies that report on bank accounts, just like there are 3 agencies that report on credit reports. So you need to also get your bank account report, see if you've been called out for that for some reason, and let them know and put a freeze on that too. And then Social Security has now an online system called My Social Security, which they're encouraging everybody to do, and it gets you
which I have. I did it.
Direct access to your balance and how much you're going to be getting and that kind of thing. But people can hack into that too and make a claim on your Social Security if they have your number and your name and address and birth date and all that.
But I can tell you, having done the My Social Security, is that you put in then a password.
Exactly. That's what
and so then, by passwording it, you're able to
That's what I meant.
some,
So if you set up one of these accounts, you can make it a little more secure. So that's important too.
You're doing good work, Stuart.
Thank you. Thank you.
Doing good work. I know everybody's got a lot of questions for you from this episode because they got health, they got finance, they got travel. He's got everything.
The other thing I mentioned to you earlier, that in addition to all this sort of security thing, there's one cool thing which I like. I have a new phone. Do you have a new phone that has facial recognition and fingerprint ID and all that stuff? So now they're making this part of the security system for the country as well, so that if you are buying something using a credit card somewhere, and many times 1 out of 6 credit card transactions is denied because of questionable. It's a huge number now. So I often, we get a phone call, are you actually making this purchase? Is this really you in this country right now or whatever? So now they're going to say, instead of calling you up or trying to track you down, they'll say, before you make this transaction, please give us your fingerprint, or please do facial recognition so we know it's really you.
Well, and there's been, have you heard anything about the concerns about facial recognition? Because people have kind of the same concerns that they do about, putting their DNA out there, because the facial recognition, it's like...
They claim they don't record, they don't keep these things on file. What they do is they say, scan your driver's license and then do a facial recognition. So if you have someone's driver's license and you have their same face, then you could, but that's not going to work, right? So you have to you give them both, and then they drop them. But if they use them to confirm that you are the right person who you say you are making this transaction.
45 seconds left. Other
Albuquerque?
Stories. Albuquerque. I love Albuquerque.
Yes.
Balloons.
Balloons. Yes, that's one of the pictures on our cover. Yes.
Yes. We love Albuquerque. Why are we going to Albuquerque?
It's just a fun story about all the kinds of things you can do. It's getting cold here, right? So people are looking for warmer places to go and enjoy. So Albuquerque is the land of the sun, right? That's where a lot of things happen.
It's where Breaking Bad was. It's a place of terrible meth and all that.
Well,
is that what you're trying to send people?
Look good and look bad at things, I guess. And then Greenwich Village. Speaking of Breaking Bad, and we have a story about Greenwich Village and the old sites and how they're still there, and you can go take a look at where this was done and that was done. Bob Dylan played and all these kinds of things. So it's for memory lane for people who have been through that.
I think Beacon Newspaper Tours is ready to go on.
What a great idea!
And we can go carry some.
Would you come if I was the tour leader?
I'm coming.
All right,
absolutely.
Sounds good.
I think that's a great idea.
That'd be fun.
Let's do it.
Wow.
All on Stuart.
Great idea.
Stuart, thank you so much. Look forward to having you back next month.
Thank you.
Tom, how are you?
How are you?
I'm doing great. Now, I understand there's a lot of things going on in our library system and interim director and all that, but I think while those are really important, those issues, I think what really focused on the big read.
Yes, indeed.
We had this Montgomery Community Media, where we are right now, I think is one of your big sponsors.
That's right.
Collaborative organizations. We've talked about it a little bit here, but I think from the horse's mouth here, I am so excited about what the big read is. And in fact, I was at the library the other night and I saw a bookmark that was all about this book and the big read, and I said, "Oh my gosh!"
Yes, indeed. Well, we are equally excited about this. Is a program that's funded, just a little background, funded by the National Endowment for the Arts. For us locally here, what we do is the main objective is to underscore the value of reading and what it teaches us about the world. And that's done through highlighting the work of a contemporary modern author, this one right here, Dinao Mengistu, his book, The Beautiful Things That Heaven Bears. And there's events held like readings, book clubs, panel discussions about the book and about literature in general. It's a wonderful, wonderful
Well, this
project.
author, he's from here, an Ethiopian immigrant. Many people don't know that the DC area and Silver Spring is the capital of this, is the largest Ethiopian community outside of Ethiopia, the largest gathering outside of Addis Ababa.
It is true.
And so
It is
what a wonderful book, especially for people who have not had as much interaction with the immigrant community as others.
It's
What
a
an
wonderful
awakening.
book that gives a perspective of being an immigrant in this country. It's full of humor, drama, pathos. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. The local effort, as you mentioned, Montgomery County Media was the lead in getting this in partnership with Montgomery County Libraries and us, the Friends of the Library in Montgomery County. We are just delighted about this, and the momentum building around this has even taken a higher step up by the fact 2 days ago the County Council issued a joint proclamation declaring 2018 to be the year of the Big Read Montgomery. So,
This is a local author too, right?
indeed, well, yes, indeed.
Is that always the case? Do we always pick a local book for this?
I'm not sure. I don't know for sure if that's the case or not, but I think he is now living in New York. He's in New York right now, but he has been here. He lived
Let
here
him
for
go?
a time.
Why did we do that?
Well, we're trying to get him back. We want him to speak at one of our events next year.
And do you pick multiple books for multiple age groups?
In this particular case, the focus is on this book.
I see.
And I think the idea being is to focus on this book, which then translates into looking at other forms of literature for, appropriate ages and
And
so
what's the
forth.
value for, I mean, if that book is the one that in Montgomery County is being put out there, like, okay, this would be, a shared experience to read this book, what do you think the value of having sort of that shared culture, shared background is?
One of the important things that's come out and said is that this is the type of literature that helps us to look at issues that oftentimes will divide us and to look at commonalities that we share amongst each other, whether it's ethnic, racial, or economic differences, and how we can look at these things from a common standpoint, maybe help us to bring us closer together.
Books can do that.
It's a wonderful thing, wonderful thing. And one last thing I'd like to mention as well is that we have a nomination process which is for an award called the Librarian's Choice Award, which we give out every year. And it's an award that's given to a local writer who exemplifies the commitment given to supporting the literary community here in Montgomery County through education, advocacy, or through philanthropic donations. The nomination process for that ends on December 31st. The award is given on April 14th at our Library After Dark event, which is also held on during National Library Week.
April 14th, one if
sir.
by sea, one if by land, two if by sea.
Absolutely.
Same, or around that time. I guess that was-
Exactly.
right.
It's right around tax time,
Right.
too.
Yeah.
18. What for you? You've dedicated so much of your life to libraries and to books. What does all of this do for you? I mean, what have you been able to see as a result of this effort to increase the literary awareness of our community?
I see it through the eyes of my daughter. She's 17. And what I see there is her becoming more knowledgeable about the world. She sees it through lenses that are different from ours. And she sees it, for example, one of her closest friends is an ethnic Ethiopian. And she has friends from various parts of the world, so to say, with different ethnic backgrounds and so forth, and helping younger people to be able to see the commonalities that we all share as opposed to the divisions that take us apart.
If you can't travel the world, I'm lucky enough to do that in my work and come back with exactly that belief about the world, then the books are the only way to do it.
Oh, absolutely.
What recommendations do you have for us? We've got about 15 seconds.
One, of course, if you'd like to come to the Library After Dark event in April of next year, we'd love to have you. It's a wonderful event. And also, I would strongly suggest you read this book. It's a
What
wonderful
else are
book.
you reading?
I am reading multiple books at the same time.
Multiple books at the same time. That's the last word. And all of us should be reading multiple books at the same time. Thank you guys for joining me. And thank all of you in the viewing audience for joining all of us for this week's edition of Montgomery Week in Review. I'm Don Moores, inviting you to join us next week at this very same time.